Splatoon 3 has had a subtle issue for about a year or so, and with 11.0, I think this problem accelerated. Movement-focused weapons have been trending down for some time, and at this point are pretty mediocre, and as such, the movement-intensive parts of the movement shooter have been seeing a bit less importance. Now, I want to get the disclaimer right off the bat. This topic is primarily for higher level competitive play, even more so than usual on this channel. This is really about the developments at top level coordinated play, and at most parts of the game, the stages are probably a larger factor than anything I'm going to talk about here, which obviously those apply here as well, but I don't really have anything to say about a topic that I covered accurately 3 years ago. For today, I want to focus on the balance of certain weapons that I think is a much more fixable problem. But before we get into those, we need to talk about weapons that check movement. What I mean by that is a weapon that's designed in a way to where it deals with mobile weapons. So think Brush's large hitbox in short range, Blaster's AoE at mid-range, or Charger sightlines at long range. These are all made to restrict movement in certain range values, and that is necessary for Splatoon. Outside of, the whole weapon variety thing, it makes fights feel different when you have to change what parts of the stage are good to fight in. And also, movement doesn't always equal fun gameplay. When people hear about movement, you're much more likely to think of someone running it down, but mobility can also mean running away. Good mobility gives you a lot of control over a fight, where it's taken, how long you want it to be. But worse than that, in this game it also gives you control over paint. Mobile weapons have a much easier time turfing the ground compared to slower options. There is a reason why over the competitive history of Splatoon, so few supports have been slower choices. You need to give them a lot to offset how much more punishable they are, and whenever they get punished, they're not painting. There's a reason why the most passive meta we had was when all the shooters were at their best. This is why having options that can go in and blow you up, even with your ability to dance around them, can be so important. That said, these movement options have been balanced for quite a while, as a lot of work has been done since late game Splatoon 2. So, with some exceptions, there isn't much of a concern of these weapons creating unhealthy playstyles in modern day. I also am not trying to say that slow, big hitbox weapons don't have interesting movement. Sometimes it's the lack of basic movement options that make things so interesting. Dynamo having to roll to paint under itself, or using Sprinkler to paint a wall it's jumping onto. Those kind of things are cool because they're restricted. For a normal weapon like a dually or a shooter, this isn't impressive, but for a weapon like this, it's kind of interesting. But I think that's all we have right now. To me, this game has 3 main classes that enable movement: dualies, splatanas, and brellas. Shooters are worth mentioning as they have their moments as well, but they're more all-rounders that work with most things. What makes these 3 weapon classes special is that they all enable each other. I'm not going to spend too much time on these since they're kind of obvious. Dualies have less paint than shooters, but dodge roll mobility. They are combat-oriented shooters. Brellas slow down fights with their shields, and that added option gives more dynamic movement to fights as you work around them, both for the Brella user and those against it. And Splatanas have a dash and play around their own mobility with different kinds of attacks. The most important thing you need to know is these 3 weapons naturally complement each other because they all have that focus. Splatanas cover damage and range, dualies have mobility and consistency, and Brellas can stall and control the fight pacing. They all work with each other very well and have some overlapping strengths, like being able to fight well off a super jump. So ideally, you want a few of these in a solid spot so they can enable each other, and you end up having comps focused around mobility as their main strength. Right now, we don't have that at all, and we barely even see one of these in comps these days. So what's going on? A lot of them do suffer from being nerfed in Splatoon 2 or early 3, when these archetypes were stronger. But even then, I think over the past year or so, nerfs to powerful AoE options and other midlines have been pushing things back in these weapons' favor. While specials and stages do hurt it a little bit, I don't think they're major components either. These weapons have been strong even with both of these factors. And some of the specials are even good for the mobile weapons. To me though, it's primarily 11.0's changes that accelerated this decline because of 4 main things: vac spam, boosted AoE power, the vanilla blaster matchup, and heavy splatling. Since VAC got a 50% increase in its HP, it's become pretty solid, but it's especially broken on Vanilla 96. This weapon outputs so many of them that it's easy to cycle them frequently. It's cited as the main reason it's good in competitive play. And VAC has some positives for mobile weapons, especially Splatanas that can counter it, but the problem here is the sheer spammability. That aspect heavily favors slower weapons. It is much harder to run down these weapons when they can frequently tank, and a lot of sustain options in this game come with limited mobility. Think how slow vacuum moves, or bubble being stationary. Mobile weapons can't really take advantage of those as much, but slower weapons that oftentimes just need to be in the right position have an easier time working off it. Again, if it wasn't as spammable, I think it could turn into a positive, as there's a lot of room for faster weapons to punish 96's speed or slower weapons in these comps, but the output right now reduces that counterplay too much. Another thing that happened in 11.0 is every weapon got hitbox changes to compensate for smaller squid form size. For pretty much every weapon, I think these make sense. But on blasters, they made a mistake. Not only did they get a direct size increase, which, alright, that's fair, but a radius size one? That's not only a huge hitbox change, but it also felt unnecessary. Blaster AoE sizes have been trending downward for a while. The average radius size is 3.3, while in Splatoon 2 it was 3.5. And even S-Blast short range mode was recently made a lot smaller. Then 11.0 came along and made all of them larger. I think this is just an overall unhealthy and unnecessary change. And while this has affected all of them in a negative way, this especially hurts Vanilla Blaster, a weapon that is much faster than other blasters already and got even faster with a buff in 11.0. It's such an insane mobility stat that it moves faster than Luna, but V-Blast has been balanced out already by having the smallest blast radius. It was the first one to get that radius size back in Splatoon 2. But now, not only did that become the standard, but because it's a shorter range blaster, it got its radius size increased more than other options. So now, we have a vanilla blaster that is even more mobile than before when that was already a good strength, and it lost its main weakness that was responsible for its weapon identity and skill curve. That's a big problem when it's a weapon that bullies mobile weapons. Short-range shooters, most dualies, Brellas, and most Splatanas do not want to fight this thing, and it is absolutely everywhere. The last reason I want to bring up here is heavy splatling. That might be a weird reason to include it, but its unique comps because of the 11.0 buff are what's causing issues right now. Heavy splatling has won 2 recent area cups and gotten 3rd in another, but the interesting part is every single result has not been heavy as the anchor, but a midline. 2 of these with pencil, and 1 of them even with E-liter. It's that combination that I think causes some problems. The insane paint and long-range pressure provides extremely low map terrain to work with. Normally, this downside of heavy is checked by its matchups against other anchors, but now it has its own one to guard it while also having the most overtuned painting stat in Splatoon history. The combined result of all of these changes is mobile weapons are dealing with an insane amount of their counters at once. You're fighting a blaster, a heavy, a tri, a charger, vac spam, rollers, the list goes on. The best comps can easily have 3 to 4 of these counters at the same time, with either heavy sustain or a lot of AoE, both of which have gotten drastically buffed. That makes the skill required to use any mobile weapon very hard to justify. Even short-range shooters, which have been used in comps for forever, are struggling right now. Mid-range ones like Forge and 96 seem a bit better because they have the range to deal with all these insane up-close killing options. The overcorrections from 11.0 on release I think were okay. Splatoon needed larger system changes and a shakeup, and a lot of what 11.0 does with things like Aura or the stealth jump nerfs or the overall hitbox changes are healthy positive ones. My issue instead comes with 11.1, a patch that they released sooner than usual, a patch with the responsibility of making sure that changes in 11.0 didn't go too far, and it failed at that. I think that the changes for this aren't inherently complicated. Reduce the radius size of blasters, give heavy the same downtime we did for Dynamo so that its heavy paint output is changed. The reason reason I specify downtime is not only does that allow you to keep the buff it got, but having added downtime is the main thing that would hurt heavy being used alongside another anchor, since that's a weakness weapons like Pen and E-liter already share, and reduce the vac spam output on 96. Furthermore, I would still like to see a few buffs to mobile options, especially swords, given that vac and sustain could use a few more counters right now, and I want that style of play to stay important because it's also been the only thing challenging AoE recently. I know this is a bit more of a top-end competitive topic than usual, but I hope I was still able to showcase a bit of what's been going on recently and why some top players are dissatisfied with the state of the game right now. I really do hope that the meta shakeups can be interesting because there is potential for a lot of playstyles to be viable right now. But to do that, we need to take a look at the core problems affecting competitive play, not just solo queue. So I really hope that's something we can see. Thanks for watching.